evening, everyone. Welcome to our Lake Minnetonka Plymouth area membership meeting. I am Sue DeSalle. I am a voter services co-chair and a member of the board of directors. I'm going to be serving as your moderator for this evening, standing in for our president, Rebecca Hawthorne, who is traveling and is very sorry to be missing it, I can tell you. Well, I'm delighted to welcome members not only from our league, but from the West Metro and New Hope areas as well. And we are all looking forward to a really very special evening of conversation with Senator Rest. The senator has asked that this be a time of informal dialogue. She welcomes your questions, but she also wants to hear from you on your observations about issues that are important to you. So it indeed is an honor to welcome Senator Ann Rest, a longtime Minnesota state legislator and one of our own, as an equally longtime and active LWV New Hope area member. She well understands our motto, one of our mottos, vote it counts, because she won her first election by just 56 votes. So Senator Rest grew up in Illinois and clearly is, in my view, a Renaissance woman. She earned her BA and master's degrees in Latin and Greek from Northwestern University and the University of Chicago. So when people say legislation is written in a language that no one understands, Senator Rest can honestly say she came to the legislature prepared. In addition, she received an MA in teaching from Harvard, a master's in business taxation from the University of Minnesota, a master's in public administration from Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government, and she also is a retired certified public accountant. So Senator Rest's legislative service spans more than 4 decades, first for 16 years in the House, and now it'll be 26 years in the Senate. Over the course of her career, Senator Rest has chaired major committees in both chambers, including the Powerful Taxes Committee, making her the first legislator in Minnesota history to chair tax policy in both the House and the Senate. She also chaired the Legislative Audit Commission and has served as Senate Pro Tem. Well, titles matter. What truly defines Senator Rest's legacy is the substance of her work. Her leadership has shaped Minnesota's tax system, local government funding, and fiscal oversight in ways that affect nearly every Minnesotan. She has been known not only for her command of complex policy, but also for her insistence on fairness, clarity, and careful stewardship of public resources. Equally important, Senator Rest's career offers a window into the evolution of women's leadership in Minnesota politics. She began serving at a time when women were far fewer in number in the legislature and has lived and shaped the growth of women into committee chairs, caucus leaders, and institutional decision makers. Throughout, she has been recognized for her ability to work across differences and for her belief that governing is, at its core, a collaborative endeavor. So thank you so much, Senator Rest, for being with us tonight. And would you like to start us out with a few comments?
Thank you very much, Sue. And thank you all for being interested in what I might have to say. I am going to begin with some telling you a couple of stories about transformative experiences that I've had. And most of them were before I was 14 years old. And I didn't know any of you then. So you don't know. You don't know whether I'm telling the truth. I'll put it that way. But I assure you that the lessons I learned as a child have been our moral guide. And I did bristle a little bit about you describing me as from Illinois. I graduated from high school there, but I'm a Southerner. I'm from Virginia, born in Norfolk, Virginia. My family has roots in the Commonwealth of Virginia since 1701, in a direct line from our family founder, Daniel Duval. My own daughter, my precious daughter, is the only one in that line of my line who was not born in the state of Virginia. She was born in Illinois. And so I just want to tell you just a few things, and then I'm open to certainly to the dialogue. I imagine for some of you, as for me, the most influential members of our families have been our mothers. And when I was 6 years old, they didn't have kindergarten in Virginia in 1948. I'm sitting on the stoop with my grandmother, who I called Mama, shelling butter beans. And the deal was, if I would help shell them, I didn't have to eat them. And I thought that was a really good deal. It was the only time as a little girl where I didn't have to sit with my knees together because I used my skirt. We wore skirts even in the middle of summer, and and I was barefoot. Um, and I could put I could I could throw the shells in my lap and then transfer them. And so and maybe this is also true for some of you. I hope it is that conversations with particularly with people like our grandmothers are not always or even particularly about conveying information. Um, they are about affirming and confirming relationships. So I'm sitting there minding my own business, as it were, um, and shelling the butter beans. And my grandmother says to me, Miss Ann, and I said, yes, ma'am. And she says, I know you're going to be going to school soon. And I said, yes, ma'am. And the questions just sparked in my head. What does she know I can read? I mean, what is going on here? And um, and that wasn't it, although I could read. And she said, I want you to remember who you are, young lady, and where you've come from, who your family is, and you are never, ever to bring disgrace upon this family. And I said, oh, yes, ma'am, never. I didn't, I had no idea what she was talking about, but I was sure what the answer should be. And I, um, I kept that in mind because what she was teaching me was a lesson about ethical behavior, about respect, about being polite, about um, uh, about what an attitude should be toward education. I I did learn to read early because my mom volunteered in the cafeteria of the um, elementary school that my brother was going to, and there's no babysitters, so I sat in his classroom for a year and a half, and I learned to read, and I learned as a 4.5-year-old, I learned how to read, and I learned how to count and do simple arithmetic. That was very important because of a second lesson, and that is um, about cheating. And I lived in a neighborhood where it was mostly boys and me, and and we would play games outside and as well as board games. One of them was Monopoly, and they didn't think I could read the numbers, and they didn't think I didn't see them putting $500 bills under the Monopoly board to drag out when it was convenient for them. But I could change a $50 Monopoly bill, and um, and the other thing about it is that I didn't let them know that I could do that. So that was my knowledge for me in confronting honesty and also cheating. My brother, who was one of those little boys, denies up one side and down the other, and because he's the most honest person I know, um, that he never cheated me in Monopoly. Um, but the neighborhood that I was in was all boys and me from the time I was 4 to maybe almost 7. And I learned a lesson then in belonging. When we would be outside and people would be and the kids would be um, choosing up sides for some sort of game like informal baseball or something. Um, um, you probably have already guessed I was never chosen, and I got really tired of that. And I was always last, and they got the leftover, which was me. And I decided I didn't have to put up with that. So I chose the cutest boy in the neighborhood who happened to be our next door neighbor. And every time we were going to choose sides, I just announced, I'm on Skeeter's side. And I didn't have to get chosen because I was the chooser. Since I made my announcement to retire, um, which some people thought it was going to be the day after I made the announcement, but of course, it's what I really meant. I wasn't going to run for re-election, a decision I made over 4 years ago. And I, they said, well, what are you going to do? And I'm getting suggestions about all these retiree organizations I can join, and this and that and the other thing. And I said, no, what I want to do is to go back to my first love, and that is being a teacher. So I'm hoping to find a teaching job someplace. I'm not as a volunteer, but respecting my life as an experience as a teacher. But then in the last month or so, I had uh, just the most incredible experience and the most fun I've ever had in my life. And I've decided, although I am a practicing Methodist, I am quite ready and willing to believe in reincarnation, so that in my second life, not in my retired life, but in my second life, um, I want to return as a 22-year-old um, Navy pilot. And the reason for that is a few weeks ago in Atlanta, visiting the Delta World headquarters, I got to fly in an Airbus simulator. And I flew over Minneapolis. I flew um, over Washington, D.C. I flew up and down the coast of Virginia and North Carolina, the Outer Banks. Um, and my instructor, just by chance, also happened to be a native of Norfolk, Virginia. And he would point out everything below us as we were flying um, over Norfolk. And it turned out that his grandparents, my grandparents, and my parents, and my friend Patsy Green is here, and she knew my mother well. Um, uh, they were all buried in the same cemetery, Forest Lawn, in Norfolk, Virginia. And I felt like I could just reach up to the heavens and touch them. It was just an amazing experience, and it was so much fun. I ended by going to Denver, flying at Denver, and I did 5 takeoffs and landings and one touch and go. And I've never been in an airplane where they actually did that, but I did practice it. And for an hour and a half, it was, the experience of a lifetime. And I was able to set aside all the grief that we were experiencing here in Minnesota, and I was very grateful for that. Um, and I will just end by anytime you want to ask a question, would you begin by saying, what have you been doing important, maybe to everyone else around you, maybe not so important to yourself, but what have you done to make the lives of your neighbors and your friends safer? And I will start with myself. Um, I mentioned I'm a practicing Methodist, the lay leader at my congregation, and recently we joined with the daycare, the childcare organization that has 60 kids that come to um, our child care center, which is in the first floor in the basement of our church, and we made what we called blessings bags. We for protesters that were going to be out in the cold on marchers and other kinds of activities that consisted of um, a little prayer, a thank you note from the child care kids and their parents who were there assembling these 100 blessings bags, and lots of candy and uh, hand warmers, and we didn't have whistles, but hand warmers and lip balm and just little things that might make the experience that they were doing on our behalf um, uh, just a bit more comfortable. So with that, I do have the questions that they sent me, but someone can start us off if you want, and then we can see what kind of a conversation we have. I do have listening sessions in New Hope at Frankie's. 3 are coming up on the 14th and 28th of February, and then on the 14th of um, of um, of March. I don't believe any of you are eligible to come except for Patsy, because these are only for constituents. And I go to them and they talk and I listen. But tonight, I'm going to regard you, all of you, in that manner.
Thank you so
So
much.
who
And
wants to start?
well, let me just say we'd like to have everybody please use the raise your hand to be recognized. It's under React at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll be able to identify who has a comment or a question. So let's start that out. Do we have any people here? I'm trying to get.
I sometimes start by just calling on somebody and saying, "What's on your mind?" And I'm gonna see the people that are in this list who I don't know, and would ask. Well, I do actually know one, Martha Mix. Besides Patsy, Martha, what's on your mind? What would you like to say?
Um, well, I lived in Newport News for a while.
Did you really?
Yeah, my husband was in transportation corps there at Fort
Sure.
Eustis. Um, and I love the accent of Virginia. It's very,
Oh,
very aristocratic sounding. I'm curious, what was it like when you first went to the legislature? Were you welcomed by your fellow male legislators, or were you viewed as kind of an oddball that they really couldn't quite work with?
I th
Because you're
um,
female.
I think that my experience is probably similar to um, uh, uh, many of you as well. And um, I think to start with, it was a bit awkward. Um, Women in the legislature back in the 80s certainly came to run for office thinking that they had to be qualified in everything, and certainly more qualified than anybody else. And so we were educated, um, we were um, professionals, and uh, and most of us did not have young children. That's changed over the time. We've had babies born not on the floor of the Senate, but we've had babies born during their time in the legislature, and welcomed and accommodated. Certainly since 1984, we have had many more women. Unfortunately, in the last few sessions, I don't mean legislative sessions, I mean biennium, the there have been more and more women. We have more women in the DFL Senate caucus than we have men, by just one member or two members or something. But that has not been observed among Republican women. There are just, I think now with the last special election, um, they have 33 members, but they only have 4 women members. And I think that is very, very unfortunate. I don't know if that is the case in the House. Certainly their leader is a woman. And since they have co-chairs, many of their co-chairs, one that would come from the Republican Party, and as well as the one from the DFL Party, um, have been women, and many of them um, have been a great deal of experience. So I would say that that's a difference then. But when I started, um, we had, and I don't regret that we changed them, but it did change the nature of relationships in the legislature. We um, we socialized a lot by going to events that were sponsored by organizations uh, and um, lobbying groups and so forth. Um, and we got to know members of the. I certainly know all the members of the Senate, but I couldn't make a list that would get to half of the members of the Minnesota House. And if you gave me a list of the Minnesota House, I would not be able, except for maybe, um, oh, maybe a dozen, 2 dozen, maybe at the most. I couldn't tell you what party they are. Um, a lot of them I have not ever met. And that came about when we changed the gift ban law, making it uh, against, um, I think I think it's against the law, not just against our own rules, about accepting the gift of going to a reception that was being hosted by a lobbying group, unless we paid. And many of us would say, I'm not going to pay $25 I'll, to go to a reception. I'm going to go home or back to my apartment or wherever. And we lost a lot of opportunity for camaraderie and getting to know people in the other party. That sometimes is changes when we go to conferences and our colleagues from the other party are present, and Minnesotans tend to stick together no matter what. And so we get to know people, even members of our own party in the Minnesota House. We get to learn a little bit more about them. I do think that there is an opportunity for collaborative approach to legislation that was not there when I was first elected. That certainly within my tax committee, I say my tax committee, the Senate Tax Committee, Taxes Committee, is very different now, and we are very collaborative. Although I don't expect a single Republican vote for the tax bill, and they oblige me with that. But nevertheless, I work with them. I consider Senator Weber, the Republican lead, to be a good friend, and they know the tax bill as well as I do, the members of the committee, when it goes to the floor. So more collaboration in some ways, but distancing and not building relationships as we did 40 years ago.
Senator, we have a question here. If you, Jane Martin.
But who was the first question?
Jane Martin.
No. Okay, Jane. What have you done to help your community? And then I'll take your question.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. One thing I've done is I have given money to the school where I used to work, Hopkins Middle School, because they have many families who are struggling. And then also made sure that message got out to the rest of the retirees who are very willing to help and interested in helping the school district. So
great, thank you. Thank you from all of us for you doing that.
One small thing, but I am very concerned about many things at the moment. One being the erosion of women's rights. And I just wanted to get your perspective and to see if you could give us any historical references as well as any ideas of what we should do to make sure that we hold on to the progress that we've made. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think Minnesota is as strong a state as you can find that will go the extra yards to protect the rights of women, and peculiarly with reproductive health. We want the same rights for all people who live here, quite frankly, as well as the special rights that are accorded to citizens, like the very important action of being able to vote. But I think we're pretty strong, and we have passed very strong legislation. We have never been able to pass a Minnesota ERA. And in my own league, they asked that as one of the questions in the interview that I'm going to be participating in on I think it's Sunday afternoon. They wanted to know my position on the ERA, and I said, well, it hasn't changed since before I could vote. So the better question would have been perhaps, do you think that it will ever, a Minnesota ERA will ever on its own pass? And of course, that is solely in the power of the legislature. It doesn't require, as you know, a governor's signature. So the midterms are coming up. They're not midterms for us. They're the beginning of a new legislative biennium. So who knows how many votes there would be to pursue a Minnesota ERA and putting it on the ballot.
Senator, we have another question for you. Heidi Cater.
Hi, Heidi.
Hello, Senator Rest. Thank you so much for being with us tonight and taking questions. So I sit on the school board in Wayzata.
Oh,
And
thank you very much.
Thank you. But let me thank you for your service. So I know what it is to serve, not as much as you, but I hope to get there. So I will tell you the past few weeks have been extraordinarily heavy, very heavy for our schools. And as we watch students get detained from schools, there's a sinking feeling. And so what I've been trying to do is just to be available to teachers, to be available to administrators. There's a lot of talking, there's a lot of phone calls, there's a lot of angst, and I think I'm trying to be there for people as much as they can, even though even though we have our rights and we know what constitutionally we are allowed to do. Sometimes it feels like we don't necessarily have control in the situation. So my concerns are deep when it comes to our schools and our funding as students are stepping away from school for 15 days. If a student is away from school for 15 days, we lose their funding.
Yes.
And so we are hoping and praying that there is a protection of our funding for those students so that they can come back and so that we can properly continue to support them through this crazy time.
Well, as I understand it, if the school district, which I'm sure Hopkins does, and provides the opportunity for online learning,
Yeah.
and the students avail themselves of that they are counted for that day's daily attendance. It's only when they don't
it's a
avail them,
Yeah.
they don't avail themselves if they're gone for a longer period of time that the school district loses funding. So in a sense, there is that opportunity to learn, but I think almost all of us would agree that the socialization that comes from being in the classroom, not only for the students, but for the teacher, the teacher is in the physical presence of his or her students, that I would not be surprised. I'm not on the education committee, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be certainly recognition of at-home learning, online learning, but that I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bill that would be widely endorsed that has a little bit of grace and forgiveness in reasons that children are not in school and not punish, or not, it's not punish exactly, but not recognize that reason as a not only legitimate, but a preferred course of action on any given day when parents and children are afraid to go to leave the house for any reason. And we need to be grateful for those who can get their children to school, and sometimes who go on and help other parents who can't leave the house to get their children to school. So I think that as a community value is coming out loud and clear in Minnesota, and I'm glad you're part of it. I'm glad to be part of it. I really regret the position of some of the school board members in Columbia Heights who are followed by ICE and who feel harassed by them, even if all they're doing is whenever they leave the house, they're being followed. Those are real education heroes in my mind.
Thank you.
I have one question, Sue.
Okay.
So I think this is really connected to the last question that was asked. So on my board, we've had a legacy of very strong female voices, and it's not as much right now. And my curiosity for you is, what is your advice? Because those are some of the softer things, right? There's policies and there's the hard pieces that we can put in place. But from an environmental standpoint or from a culture standpoint, what's your advice for governing bodies on how to maintain strong female voice in the face of changing value systems or times?
Well, I think that we all have to recognize that our governing bodies in our communities have very different responsibilities. The city councils, you can have a couple of different forms of city councils. You can have a strong mayor, you can have a strong council, or a strong city manager like we do in New Hope. But they have to really study and accept what their role is. And for example, in school boards have one employee, just one, and that's the superintendent. And when they hire a superintendent, they should have confidence in that person's ability and judgment to, quite frankly, run the school district. And their job is not to look over spreadsheets of how much money they spend on toilet paper. That's not their job. Their job, just like in the legislature, are policymakers, which they pass, that they hand over to their one employee to carry out, and then to let that person do their job. Our school board has, or when I say I certainly want to have parts of Golden Valley are in the Hopkins School District as well as 281. But we have more women on the 281 school board than we have men. When I was first teaching, there was only one woman, and it was a long time before there were any other women on the school board. And but I'm not sure that everybody that runs for the school board has educated themselves in what the law is with regard to what their role is. And I think probably there needs to be more of that educating. Certainly it does in the legislature. It is very disappointing when people run for the legislature because they're activists and they are advocates, and they think that's their job when they get in the legislature. Just as a new member should leave their campaign at the door, they should also leave their role, not their attitude toward policy, but their role as an activist or an advocate. That should be left at the door as well, because you may be an environmental expert, but you've got to vote on education bills. You have to vote on tax bills. You have to vote on what you're going to do in the courts, how are you going to define crime, and you can't just sit there and let other people make your decisions and who just say, "Oh, just vote with me," and you don't have to know anything else except the issue that you ran on to get you here. And that has increasingly been what new members of the legislature come to the legislature with, and people can turn that around. You can make a decision to be a policymaker, not and not just an expert in one issue for which you are a huge activist or advocate.
Senator, we'll move on to Leslie Gillette.
Hi, Leslie.
You're muted.
There we go. Now I'm not muted. I started practicing law about 5 years before you joined the legislature.
Okay.
And at the time, those were very male-dominated arenas. I'm interested in what you've seen over the years about changes in how women legislators are treated and heard and then positioned for leadership in the legislature.
Well, and let's see, sorry about my dog. So I apologize for her. She's a barker. Women dominate the leadership in the Minnesota legislature right now on both sides. The majority leader is in the Senate, is a former majority leader in the House, Senator Erin Murphy, and before her was Senator Carrie Dietzick. Before her was Senator Lois Franson, and before her was Senator Susan Kent. So women in leadership positions who are well, we have a different level of what that means in the Senate than in the House. The Speaker in the House has all the appointing power. The majority leader in the Senate has persuasive power, but she can't tell a chair what to do. She can't. The Senate taxes chair, finance chair, we're all elected by our caucus, and so the majority leader has no say in that election. Unless she goes around and tries to persuade people to vote one way or another. That's different in the House. They elect the Speaker, the majority party, and then she or he has all the power. And certainly, I would say, I can't think of her last name right now, but the majority leader in the House was a woman, and her first name was Connie, and she was a very powerful figure. The first DFL speaker was one of my mentors, at least legislative mentors, not life mentor, Representative D. Long, and certainly Representative Hortman and now Representative Damath are in leadership positions. Is the quality of their legislative leadership different? I'm not so sure that it is, and every single leader has been, and again, I've been there 40 years, a very different style, and yet sometimes just totally predictable. Because of the job that they have, the expectations that others have of them, of what it means to be that leader, and it is has a lot to do with relationship building, regardless of positions on policy issues. So while I don't know whether it's men don't want to be the leaders anymore. It's certainly the leader in the DFL leader in the House is a man now, but or if they just are choosing different ways of expressing what that leadership means. But make no mistake, it is not that women are gentler or politer or nicer. They are not. Some of the meanest characters in the legislature are women. And I've been accused of being one of the mean ones on occasion. So I don't think I'm mean, but nevertheless, strong-willed people are not limited to one group of people in just because of their gender. And women are as often wrong as they are right, which is so good, because it shouldn't be, we get this constant thing of, well, you're the first of this and the first of that, or the second, or the only, or the whatever. I want there to be so many women in the legislature that nobody thinks about that anymore. Mm-hmm. They will choose you as a leader because of all other kinds of things that you bring to the job, not just your gender.
May I ask a follow-up?
But I don't think she said what she's been doing in the community.
Oh, a limited amount. I've been donating to an organization that is providing food to people who are afraid to leave their homes.
Thank you for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Questions, comments, others? Anyway? Senator Rest, I too have been donating. Both my church, which is in downtown Minneapolis on 19th and Nicollet, very close to all that's going on down there. And it houses the food shelf for all of the downtown area. And immediately with the surge of ICE, we had calls out for volunteers and for donations. And of course, we have done that. I was hoping to go to a vigil march from my church to the area down there, but wasn't able to do that last Sunday, but hope to do so at some point in the future to really understand that. I wanted to ask you about bipartisanship. You obviously had divided government in Minnesota many times, one house or the other, and you have been known to work across party lines and work with people. What do you think the state of bipartisanship is now? You've been through a really difficult last couple of years. Tell us a little bit about that experience and how you see what might be in the future for the Minnesota Legislature.
Well, I think there are, it might surprise you that privately, there's a whole lot of it.
Yeah.
Publicly, not so much. So I work with, I mentioned Senator Weber and a number of other Republican legislators, particularly those on the taxes committee. And we will work out legislation together. The Democrats will make sure that it gets in the bill. Republicans vote against it, but they have helped to shape it. Mm-hmm. and then we get to the floor, and a Republican legislator will come up to me and say, well, I have to get up and talk about the tax bill, but I just wonder, if I do that, is my provision in danger? And I say, well, of course not. You have your job to do to represent your caucus's viewpoints on general policy, but I'm not going to hold that against your constituents. If you have a local bill or even a bill of greater substance, don't worry about it. Go ahead and vote no. I have the votes to pass the bill. You say whatever you want. And then sometimes they'll come out afterwards and apologize. Say, well, I had to attack your bill. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. It's part of the theater of political life. And it's not that I'm interested in going out and having coffee with them or something like that, but I do understand and appreciate and relish that debate that we have, or the discussions we have in the taxes committee. And we're strong enough. It's not about being thick-skinned. It's being strong and confident in your own person to engage in debate on ideas. And nobody should be afraid of doing that. And certainly not people who have common interest in making our state a better one. Just we have different ways of going about that. Now, we get mad at one another. I won't say we don't. And sometimes there's explosions on that. But debate is what we should be about, as long as we respect one another. And I like to tell my colleagues, just remember they have a family. Republicans have families, just like you have a family. And when you want to criticize someone, make sure it's not personal, so that it would embarrass their children and yours as well.
Thank you. We have another question, Jim Hallenberg. You're still muted, Jim.
Sorry, guys. Thank you so much, Ann, for joining us tonight.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you, well, first a softball question, but who was your favorite governor serving? And then what was your favorite legislature that you served in your 40 years of working?
Well, I think I would say that my favorite governor is Rudy Perpich. He was governor when I joined. I made a video called a Race for the House, half an hour long, back in the days when you could do that. Put it on a local cable channel. Didn't have to pay for it. But the people who videoed that were League of Women Voters members. And it's up on the Senate website now, because some of the things that I said in that interview, and we had all kinds of things of going to parades and this and that and the other thing, were about property taxes. And I got an interview with my videographer. Her name was Diane Christopher. She was a leaguer from Crystal. And I got an interview with the governor, and he already welcomed me to the legislature. And so I was really thrilled by that. And I didn't agree with him on every issue, but I never expect to. But I thought he was in the grand style of governors whose heart and whose head were in the right place.
I wanted to follow up a little more serious, and you've
Sure.
kind of touched on it, but how has ERA not been passed? After 40 years, I'm sure you're as frustrated as we are. How is this not passed in our legislature?
Well, on one occasion, it almost did. I think it passed. I think language passed that this is the state ERA, passed in the Senate. But then when the language went over to the House, there was disagreement on what the language should be, and it could have been the other way around. I don't recall right now. It could have been something was passed in the House. Of course, the language has to be the same or agreed to, and that did not happen. And quite frankly, it happened because there was disagreement about whether to refer in the language of the ERA specifically to reproductive rights. And some of you may remember that happened. and then and then I think that there were just they couldn't come to an agreement on what that language would be. This is in recent years. But remember, for the Democrats, since well, how long ago would that be? When Pawlenty was governor, we were, I think, in at least one of those times, we were in the minority. So it was going back and forth between being in the minority and majority, and there were not any Republicans that supported it. So, and we were in the minority, and the issue never even came up.
Thank you. I
Thank
think
you
we
so
have
much.
time for one more question, and Karen, is up to you.
All right. So, hey, Anne.
Hi.
So for my participation in the community, in addition to volunteering with League of Women Voters, I was out there a couple weeks ago when it was really cold, doing the ice protesting. My church is also a Methodist church in Maple Grove, and we are getting together this Sunday to kind of talk about some ministry that we can do for people who are, afraid to leave their homes, or how we can get involved and help them out. And so I guess my question for you is just, what are you looking forward to most about retiring?
Well, as I said, I want to go back to teaching. And if I were a whole lot younger, I would get training as a pilot and fly an Airbus. That's what I trained on in a simulator. And it was very interesting to me to watch the video of on ABC News of Liam coming home, flying in Delta Airlines in an Airbus 320A, and I I sat there watching the video, and I recognized the cockpit even, and that was and of course the pilots, not just of Delta but other pilots too on those big jets, they are always reaching out to the children who are their passengers to make them feel comfortable, particularly ones who are old enough to understand that they're going to be in this big box flying way over top of the world, and to make them feel comfortable and safe, because of course that's the pilot's first duty, to make sure that his or her passengers are safe. So I'm hoping at some other time that I could go back down there to go to any airlines simulator. Delta, I think, has 7 in various places, but certainly one in Atlanta. And it's really a thrill of a lifetime.
Wonderful.
And you never left the ground, but you think you're in an airplane because the ground before you is video, and the people who don't like that very much, the whole thing experience, pilots don't like the simulators because their instructor person makes them fly upside down and jiggles the plane and turbulence and so on. And I just got to make landings and take off. So, so they're always glad to be done with that experience I learned from my instructor.
Well, I think we've come to the end of our time. It's about 8 o'clock. And let me first thank you, Senator Rest, for being with us tonight. Despite your incredibly busy schedule, I can only imagine what it's like at the legislature. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and wonderful stories with us tonight.
Well, I want to in turn thank all of you, and to thank again my own league, which I joined I think the year before I ran for election, so in the 80s, and I had the education portfolio because I was a teacher, and that I never could get full understanding of why we had to have consensus, but I do appreciate the positions that the league has taken. I don't always agree with all of them 100%, and that's the way it should be too. Lively discussion among league members, and particularly as we go out of our way, and I think your league does, certainly mine, to invite and to kind of activate the younger women in our communities, of whether they're teachers, whether they work in any kind of hands-on job, whether they're mechanics or or work at McDonald's, or whether they're lawyers like some of you, or accountants, or professionals of other kinds, social workers, that and that obviously, Jim, we welcome men. And I think that was a very important thing that happened over time, and speaks well of the league, and particularly your voter service, and the way in which you conduct candidate meetings. They're always polite, respectful, and sometimes that might seem to some people as, well, can't you liven it up a little bit? But I think the format that we use allows candidates to speak their piece, and to allow the people who come to those candidate meetings an avenue by which to ask questions of candidates and feel safe doing so, particularly in this day and age. So I'm very grateful for the presence of the League of Women Voters in Minnesota.
Well, thank you, Senator Rest, again, for your many years of such dedicated service to all Minnesotans. We very much appreciate it, and for being one of us. We applaud you for your service with us and for us. And thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for being here tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.